I'm also sending you a really stupid bat movie called It Lives by Night.
This time we watched Season 10, Episode 10, It Lives by Night.
In which honeymooners get bit by a bat, but don't become Batman.
Yeah, kind of a shame that. But first, we've got a little bit of follow-up from our previous episode. We received a message from devoted listener Jess.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, Jess, who wrote on our Discord. Finished the latest It's Just a Show finally. I also have no recollection of this MST3K episode. It was the Mad Monster from Season 1. You know, we did get a few messages from people defending Season 1, but nobody defending this specific episode. And I'm down. There's some gems in Season 1, totally. But
nope, not this one.
Maybe not that one.
Meh.
But Jess's point, she writes, I know of peas and carrots, peas and carrots, from my eldest, who is our resident theater nerd. She had never heard of rhubarb being a phrase used for chatter. And there was a video attached in which she talks with her daughter about, do you recognize what peas and carrots means in a theater context? And sure enough, she does, and she has some other options. She describes them, and I thought this was very smart, as pretend whispering.
Yeah, totally.
But the other phrases that she knew, they were all just frozen produce. So,
yeah, the one I knew was watermelon.
Which is also produce, as is rhubarb.
Also produce, but not frozen. It's weird to freeze watermelon.
I guess that's just ice melon.
Yeah. Anyway,
we also got a message from listener Brett from Arizona, who wrote in a little while ago saying, hey guys, loved the latest episode of the show with the behind-the-scenes look for mainstream audiences.
Ooh.
That was our bonus episode on This is MST3K and the Making of Mystery Science Theater 3000 that we did a few episodes ago. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he wrote in back then to say, I came across a video on YouTube that has raw footage of the show being recorded that you might be interested in.
Ooh.
The clips are full length. One is of It Lives by Night. Another is Swamp Diamonds, and the third is Danger Diabolic. He included some links to those, which normally I wouldn't include links to things that are a little bit dubious, but I think in this case we'll make an exception. I'm sure the Mystery Science Theater 3000 people know they're floating about out there.
I hope so.
Yeah, they've had a little while to crack down on it if they wanted to. Hopefully I'm not spilling the beans on anything, because they're quite interesting to watch, and I think we'll talk about them in a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know whether to say thank you to Brett or whether to just not. It was, it's a really interesting watch, and I'm sure we'll say more later. But regardless of how I feel about it, thank you, Brett, because that's a really interesting resource and much more informative of a behind-the-scenes look than the videos, the videos that were produced and made that we watched previously.
Yeah, this is not a link you want to send your friends to get them into Mystery Science Theater 3000 for sure, but it's definitely an interesting archival document for anybody who's interested in what the show was like. Thought you might enjoy the links. We sure did. Great show. Brett from Arizona. Thank you, Brett, for your links and for your nice words.
Thank you, Brett.
I guess we should talk about this episode.
This time we watch Season 10, Episode 10, It Lives by Night. What would you consider the perfect honeymoon plan for a young couple on a budget? Dr. Beck and his wife have come up with a pretty good plan. Drive through scenic landscapes, picnic in the desert, a ski weekend, and a little spelunking, if you know what I mean. But wait, I don't think you do, because I mean, it's real spelunking. And even Mrs. Beck doesn't seem to understand that Dr. Beck is obsessed with caves because, bats. He studies bats. It's his job, and he just loves it. And bats bats love him too. One of them even pursues Dr. Beck while touring the cave and bites him. And wouldn't you know it, now he's turning into a bat person, but not Batman. That's different. What does it mean to be a bat person? Well, weird body changes that come with massive spasms, prophetic-ish nightmares about killing people and sucking their blood, followed by real-life killing people and sucking their blood. And while his wife will blame his issues on medication or fatigue, he's just turning into a bat person, which would be fine if he could just stop killing people. There's a tenacious sergeant who just knows Dr. Beck is behind all the killings. He pursues him even back to the caves. But Dr. Beck eludes capture and heads back to his wife, who makes beautiful music with him in a motel room. Now they're both bat people, so, they can spelunk together forever. The end.
Meanwhile, on the satellite of love, it's painting day. And that seems like a great excuse for Mike to explore how different colors of wall paint might affect people who are inside a room. Turns out, every color makes Crow want to date singer-songwriter Lisa Stansfield. But no color is as terrifying as eggshell. Meanwhile, in Castle Forrester, Pearl is running a poll about tactical misdirections. Turns out, the pole is just a tactical misdirection, so Mike and the bots don't realize she's spraying poison on them. And now, Crow and Tom have genetic mutations. Oh, how wry. Stay tuned to see what kinds of atrocities they'll be gently ripping next week. Batman's wife in this movie looks more than a little like Mary Tyler Moore, but not as much as Crow does when he puts on his Mary Tyler Moore wig. Or so Crow thinks. Tom, dressed up as Lou Grant, and Mike, doing a killer Ted Baxter impression, still refuse to call him Mayor. Halfway through the movie, and Mike Nelson has collapsed. Crow is all, "Oh, Mike Nelson, we love you, get up," and tells Tom to get a rabies kit stat. Several painful injections later, and Mike is back up. Turns out he was just eating a cream pastry and got all sleepy. Womp womp. Anyway, inspired by the other doctor in the movie, Mike has grown out a 70s-style mustache and tries it out on Pearl. It's going well until Crow shows up with a bigger, bushier mustache, and Pearl positively swoons. Tom's mustache, on the other hand, is so big it's structurally unstable, proving you can have too much of a good thing. And after the movie, Tom has become a franchisee of the Buddy Ebsen Hat Distressing Corporation. You remember Buddy Ebsen, Jed from the Beverly Hillbillies? Well, that franchise kit doesn't come with much, despite costing $20,000. Crow's Red Skeleton Technologies Hat Distressing Kit is much more complete. Back on Castle Forrester, Pearl is showing Brain Guy and Bobo a slideshow of how her various husbands died in various mysterious ways on their various honeymoons. One of them turned into a prairie dog, which was probably for the best. What do you think, sirs?
Do you swoon for mustaches, Chris?
No, I don't. Not especially. I mean, I can respect a nice mustache, I suppose, but they don't do anything for me.
They don't make you go all like, "Well, hello, sailor. What a mustache you have." No?
Nope. Also, sailors don't do much for me.
I guess, well, and sailors don't usually have mustaches. There's regulations and stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's some pretty good mustaches in the movie. It did come out in the 70s, right? So.
No, and I did enjoy their appreciation of the doctor who's treating our hero, I guess, who is very 70s with his perfect little mustache and knit sweaters and so forth. And they called him Dr. Mustache Love at one point.
Yes, that's right.
It's very good.
It's true. And it is also true that the mustache on the cop, not as good. Not as good as the Dr. Mustache Love.
Did you recognize the cop?
So I didn't. You told me that Michael Pataki was going to be in this film. And I did not recognize him. I had to go and look at the cast list to see who he was. And I can't believe that he was the cop.
He was.
It's like, put a mustache and a hat on this guy and I don't recognize him anymore. I don't know. He doesn't look like JC from Side Hackers anymore.
Yeah, it's like he's actually an actor.
Stop it.
And he can use things to make his body appear like a different person.
Some actors don't. It turns out that Michael Pataki does, so good for you, Michael. Good for you.
I thought he came off reasonably well in this one.
Sure, as an asshole cop who just doggedly pursues one guy for a crime. Yeah, he totally looks like that.
It's a small skiing town. How many multiple homicides do they have?
I know. And as soon as there's one, you just have to blame it on the new guy.
I mean, this is our second film in a row where we've got a killer who doesn't know what they're doing or sort of pieces it together afterwards. Which is a kind of horrible situation to find yourself in, that you're transforming into another creature and then, or something vaguely inspired by another creature, and then going off on a killing spree, and then waking up and it's like, what happened? Oh no. Like, that sucks, or would suck.
It would suck. And to be fair, like Wolfman knows it's going to happen, right? And he's like, I want a way to prevent this, and he goes out to try and find a way to prevent it. And unfortunately, unscrupulous scientists are taking advantage of him. That's a different story, right? Poor Wolfman. In this case, he's having a dream about the killing he is going to do. The killing happens, and then he's like, what just happened?
Yeah,
No, buddy. Like, I don't see how you can pretend you didn't know that this was going to happen, because you've had multiple nightmares about killing people that end up coming true. I get why he's asking to see a psychiatrist.
Yeah. Well, okay, look, you have your first prophetic dream about killing someone, and then you have a weird night, and then you wake up, and it's like, okay, that was weird, but like, it's a dream. You don't believe your dreams when they're like that. And, you know, of course it takes a couple for you to think, wait, there's a pattern here.
And to be fair, I think his first dream was about killing his wife, and he doesn't.
There you go. See, it's complicated.
But he also has dreams about doing this before he gets bit by the bat.
Okay, so there are a few CinemaSins dings in this movie, let's say.
Oh, I was willing to go out on a limb with this one. Like, he's predisposed. He's probably been bitten by a bat before. It's fine. And that fine. Maybe it's the rabies treatment that triggers the transformation for him. I can go there. Like, I'm all right with that. He has these dreams about killing people. They're nightmares. They're horrible. Sure. Like, there's 3 women in the movie. He kills them all. Fine, except for his wife, who he turns into a bat person. Anyway, the time when he starts changing happens after they try to give him a rabies injection.
I don't know. I feel like there was a gem of a good idea here that just they didn't deal with very well. I kept thinking this might make a good short story or something where they could really like get into the psychological horror of it.
Well, it's like Spider-Man if Spider-Man was the villain.
There you go. There you go. So I don't know how these rough cuts of some of the episodes have made it out into distribution, but it's an interesting thing that they did. And I guess we should explain what they are first.
I have to admit, as this movie was not a super awesome movie, it was really hard to watch the full rough cut. I did end up skipping through some of the bits that were just the movie, but basically this is just the movie. There's no segments inside of this rough cut. This is just what's happening inside of the theater. So presumably the director or producer has the movie running on the screen in front of them. There's a time counter on the side, and they're delivering the lines. And the nice part about the rough cut, which you don't usually see, is what happens in between times. when they're done with where they're going to cut away for commercial or cut away to a segment. And then there's a few minutes while they're retiming up the movie where Mike and the bots are just kind of, well, not the bots, right? At that point in time, it's going to actually be Kevin and Bill. And they're just joshing, and there's other people walking in front of the screen where you're like, where the heck did that guy come from? What? And sometimes they're not all blacked out, right? So you see these weird light silhouettes of their faces, and so there's weird texture going on. But essentially, it's the entire theater thing. It's about 2 hours long to be like an hour and 15 minutes worth of the movie that they're going to, cut apart to make the episode.
Yeah, I agree. It is not an episode that is near and dear to my heart. So it's not like, I don't know, if I had this for Catalina Caper, it probably would be more fun for me because I
Oh my gosh,
I would
yes.
know it like the back of my hand. My sense is for people who really know this episode, this is a more fun experience.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that in order to do my due diligence, I was reading the script, or the subtitles actually, of the finished episode alongside it while I watched the entire thing, because then I got a better chance of seeing when they flubbed lines or when a joke was made that would get cut, because that happens a few times.
Mm-hmm. Or when they would redo it later to say it a little bit differently.
There would be a few jokes that were replaced and a few jokes that were redone. So there's a few moments, I checked it out, where they make a joke in the theater. Tom makes one fairly early on. And if you look at the final version, you see the little puppet wobble. This is most notable with Crow, obviously, because his beak flaps. But you can see it with Tom as well when he tells a joke that gets cut and he just does a little wobble, wobble, wobble. But it's very subtle. You don't have to match up their lips. So when they do ADR later or whatever, it's fine. So that was really interesting. But this episode is, I think, particularly fun for people to watch if they're going to only watch one of these, because they're all excited about something that they're going to be doing in a few episodes, which is to say, they've just decided that, yes, they are going to do the Coily short.
Yes, there's so much mention of Coily.
This is 2 episodes before Squirm, which is where they do A Case of Spring Fever, the Coily short. And they've just watched it. They're just talking about it. They're super excited about it. And they're making all sorts of jokes about it, which they will not be able to use in the actual short. Because the first thing that comes to any of their minds when they're talking about Coily as a name is how some dog poo looks.
Yeah, it does look coily.
So the entire rest of the time when they're not actually filming the show, when they're doing commercial breaks, they will often break into other jokes about how, hi, I'm poopy, and they're willing to go blue because they're not, being recorded. They use all sorts of 4-letter words.
Oh my goodness. Yes. My favorite part about that is that at one point in time, one of them does poopy, and it sounds just like Dr. F's poopy from like the Comedy Central era. And I'm just like, oh, they did love Trace.
Yeah, that is very sweet. There's also a bit towards the end where Kevin and Mike are trying to remember the name of a newborn's first poop, which has a special name because it's a special thing, and it's called meconium, which they get pretty close to. They're like, I'm meconium-y, yay. Fun bit. It's a fun bit. There's also a really fun bit where during one of the breaks they go off on a series of riffs bouncing off each other based on Owner of a Lonely Bat.
Yes, because they had just, how many episodes is this after they did the opening with Owner of a Lonely Heart and wanting to talk about all the other things that we have to think about? The owner of the... Oh my gosh, I can't even think of a single one now. They were all so silly.
It's a memorable sketch. Yeah, that was 2 episodes ago when they did Final Justice, which has the Owner of a Lonely Heart bit at the beginning. And I guess they've still got that song stuck in their head. In fact, the PA or somebody decides to play the song for them. So you get to hear the opening of that song, and they make fun of the weird sound effects in the song and the singer's voice. And I don't know. They make a little too much hay about it, but whatever. It's fine. They're allowed to feel that way.
It's a fun moment of these people who work together all the time, like sharing an in-joke, right? Like that's clearly what it is. And if you hadn't seen the episode with Owner of the Lonely Heart, you would have no idea why they're doing this. But I was struck by how much watching this made their job seem like work.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like when you watch the episode, everything seems more fun and more light. It seems more off the cuff. Like you can see why people say, is it improv? Because they can get that feel in the way that they construct the episodes from its pieces. But watching them for 2 hours in front of the screen made it seem like, oh my God, this is like a day of work.
Yeah. They even complain about the grind about it sometimes.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where it was just like, oh, like maybe it started out as improv and stuff, but this really is a job and they do it really well. And they do it so well that when I watch a regular episode, it doesn't feel like they're doing a job.
I think that comes through the most at the very end of the rough cut, where they are doing ADR, where they're replacing and redoing and adding lines from the record that they had just finished of Hamlet.
Oh, yeah.
So you get 10 minutes of out-of-context Hamlet jokes, which is kind of fun.
Which was great, yes!
But it's all very professional. It's all very, Crow, redo, 4203, Laertes, poopy, whatever the line was.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now can you say it a little bit more bored?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, because also they're reading this from a list that they've been handed, and so they don't have the context. So like Tom gives, or Kevin, I guess, gives a line read and then is told, no, it needs to be more boring. Like that was the context for how that line was supposed to go. I was like, okay. And they do it again. And they're willing to do these multiple times. So they mostly just one and done them because, there you go. They're professionals. So
yeah. Well, and again, it's a job, right? Like they're doing their job so that the product that comes out doesn't feel like a job. Like that's an amazing thing to be able to do. Chris, this movie had a lot of bats inside of it.
It had a lot of cows in it, you telling me?
No. I said bats, although cows are just like bats, right? They're mammals. What's the difference?
There is some riff about cows and bats being together again in this movie. What was
there was a riff where they said this movie would have been so much more interesting if he had been bit by a cow instead of a bat. And they're not wrong. That would have been an interesting movie.
It would have, but then we've already talked about cows. Now we get to learn more about our friends, the bats, in a little segment that we like to call, Can Charlotte Be More Interesting Than an AI, or at least more factual, or Issues with AI?
Issues with AI.
Because AI has some issues. Let's just begin.
Can Charlotte be more interesting than AI?
Well,
The answer's probably no. And I'm really, really sad about that. Despite my laughing, that's my coping mechanism.
Well, let's see. As the human, you get to decide whether you would like to share a fun fact first, or if you'd like to hear one of the fun facts that AI wrote for us.
Last time I went first with the cows. I feel like AI should have the floor first this time.
Okay. If there were a Bat Olympics, these winged wonders would take home the gold in synchronized flying. With precise wing beats and impeccable timing, bats can fly in perfect formation, performing aerial ballets that would leave even the most seasoned choreographers in awe.
Wow. I want to see a bat ballet that's like ballet without the LLE.
Yes, that's true. It would be pretty fun to see a bat ballet. It's also fun to see bats in formation. You can watch plenty of YouTube videos of them sort of making these giant snaking clouds of bats. I don't know if they're called susurrations when they're bats, but, these giant moving swarms of bats throughout the sky. And it does look very impressive. But
coordinated, though?
Well, so this seems to be an area of active investigation. That scientists are looking into how bats handle being in formation and flying in large groups. And it's very impressive. But I did stumble upon a video, which I'll link to in the show notes, of a study where they took some slow motion footage of bats emerging from a cave in a group and so forth, trying to figure out how do they manage it? How do they, they're sort of pretty tight together. How do they manage to not keep whapping into each other as they fly out of this? And turns out they bonk into each other all the time.
Yeah, well, I can see why generally when there are large groups of them who are living in a small area, of course there's going to be some difficulties when they're all trying to go to the same place at the same time. Frankly, we all bump into each other when we're trying to get onto the subway.
There you go. Yeah, they use echolocation in some ways, but my understanding, which is not very good, is that there's something about their morphology, how they're shaped. So their wingspan is such that they're very designed, so to speak, for long distance flight and not for careful maneuvering. They're not hummingbirds. So yeah, they're going to bump into each other. It doesn't seem like this is a major tragedy in their lives that they bonk into each other, just like getting onto the subway cars, you say. But this, I'm going to say AI got kind of wrong. They are not in perfect formation, though it does look very cool when they are in formation.
And we do have some bat swarming videos happening in our movie too. So, you know, AI is pulling from our source material.
So I'm sure you can do something more accurate, but will it be more interesting than Bat Ballet?
Perhaps. Male bats lactate.
Ooh.
Okay, not all male bats. The male Dayak fruit bat, I'm not sure I pronounced that right, is an example of paternal lactation. This fruit bat is found in Southeast Asia in the Malaysian peninsula. These species are frugivorous, hence the name, fruit bat, and weighs about 150 grams on average. The reason why male bats lactate as well as females is not known, but scientists speculate that the male bats that lactate may have an evolutionary advantage since they can share the burden of feeding the little bat babies.
That's very sweet.
And so interesting. I mean, this might be TMI for our listeners, but I was not able to feed my own kid. My body just didn't do what it was supposed to do. And so I got to share feeding our baby with my partner because we were doing formula feeding. And it was a huge relief to be able to not do all of that work and wake up every time the wake up had to happen. And it's a burden, right? To have to produce food and feed. So, being able to share that seems like a good idea.
Well, that's pretty good. I've got another thing about the raising of bat babies that was provided to me by the AI. So, forget the stork. Bats have their own unique way of raising their young. In some bat species, mothers form nurseries where they leave their pups while they go out to forage. But here's the twist. Other female bats, known as aunties, step in to babysit and protect the young. Talk about teamwork.
Aww. I mean, maybe? It does seem like, from what I read, there are some female and male bats that tend to roost separately, and there are other mammals that share raising of the young. So, I don't know. Is it true, Chris?
It is mostly true.
Oh.
There are some bats that are very solitary in their maternity roosts, but there are also some bats that collectivize it a bit, that make nursery roosts, which have a lot of mothers putting their young into a shared roost because they all tend to have a baby at about the same time. And in some of those situations, one mother might stay behind to look after all the babies in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they don't seem to typically be called aunties. I don't know where that came from. It's a good term for it, though.
Yeah, sure. Babysitter seems like a weird thing to say about a bat.
Well, but that does seem to be what they are.
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that you would not take your baby with you when you are out feeding, because I think I read somewhere that a bat baby is like 30 to 40% of the size of the mother.
I think that actually some bats do that. I think they can latch on pretty well and they can fly and even hunt with a bat baby on them.
That seems amazing to me. I mean, they're really efficient flyers. I can't imagine increasing your body mass by 30% and still being able to do all of the work that you need to do to feed yourself and produce milk for your offspring. So that's amazing. And it seems like a good system, just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what else have you found out for us?
The world's smallest mammal is a bat. The bumblebee bat, also called Kitty's hog-nosed bat, is found in a few caves in Thailand and Myanmar. It's 3.3 centimeters, or about 1.3 inches from head to toe, and it weighs up to 2 grams, about as much as a dime. Scientists from Europe and Thailand have estimated the total population to only be about 10,000 bumblebee bats, but it's not considered an endangered species, just near threatened.
This one I knew about already because it's, good trivia, and also because of the fun name where the bumblebee bat isn't a bumblebee, but it is a bat.
No, but it is a bat, and it's tiny, tiny.
It's very tiny.
Uh-huh.
Do you find bats typically kind of cute or kind of gross?
I'm on the fence. Sometimes I find them cute and sometimes I find them gross because they're like furry and they got these cute little faces with the little bulgy eyes and stuff. But, like when they spread their wings, it looks really like stretched skin and kind of skeletal. And that can be a little off-putting sometimes. But mostly I think I find them cute. How about you?
I find them cute if I don't have to be in the same room with them. I don't know. There's something I find a little upsetting about them, but also something I find a little cute about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated.
It is complicated.
And I don't know if being dime-sized actually is better or not.
They're just like a little fluff ball in your hand.
But they fly.
But they're just like a little fluff ball in your hand. You could have like 3 or 4 of them in the palm of your hand. Look at them. They're so cute.
Here's a fun fact that our listeners might not know. You had never seen the Mary Tyler Moore Show until we did this episode.
Which seems wild to me that I would never have seen this show. Wild. I watched Nick at Night. I saw the Monkees and Lancelot Link. I saw the Dick Van Dyke Show. I saw Donna Reed. I saw My 3 Sons. Like, how did I not see? I saw WKRP. It's not like I'm excluding the 70s here. I don't understand how this didn't make it into heavy rotation on Nick at Night.
Well, all that has changed now because you've sat down and watched all 153 episodes of the Mary Tyler Moore Show for today.
Chris, I can't back that up, but I did probably watch about 10%.
Okay, well, that's not bad.
Which was enough to get, like a nice feel for the characters. And I watched from several different seasons just to have a sense for the progression, and you'll be happy to know that while I didn't cry when the Beast of Hollow Mountain died or Frankenstein's monster, I totally wept at several of the episodes of the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Oh, yay.
It's so good.
It's really nice. I rewatched a bunch of episodes as well, just because why the heck not? And it's interesting because I have not had an easy time watching sitcoms lately.
Oh.
It's such a weird format, and it doesn't fit quite right with how television is made these days, it feels like to me.
Oh, that's very true.
It really depends, I think, on that rhythm of you see it every week. You gather around, you have limited television options, I suppose, but you gather around with your family, like we did, and either watch it every Thursday night. You watch the sitcom that's on Thursday night, must-see TV or whatever.
Yep.
Or you watch it because it's on before the news or before Jeopardy, and so you just catch up with it that way. And none of those ways of watching TV are things that I engage in now.
No, and very few of what people make right now on the streaming services is something that you would call a sitcom.
Yeah, because it's just so strange. Like, sitcoms are designed to be made, typically something like 24 episodes a year, like the Mary Tyler Moore Show had.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like steady weekly work for the people involved, that they were, cranking them out and getting them done just in time. I mean, that's how Mystery Science Theater was made as well, more or less, in the old days. But that's just not how anything is filmed anymore.
No, it's true. No, now you make it all. You make shows the way people watch shows. You binge make a show, you put it out there, and you hope that somebody will sign you for a second season so you can binge make another season.
Yeah, or even if the binging thing isn't happening, you're still expected to have kind of more of a character arc, right?
Yes.
And this is much more of not a long arc over the course of 7 seasons, but just sitting with these characters and letting growth happen as they get set up into different predicaments and they rub up against each other in different ways, in different combinations, again and again, the same 7 main characters, whatever.
Yeah.
They interact and they grow through that. And then because they want to have some good sweeps weeks episodes, they'll have big events, especially in the Mary Tyler Moore Show, where like everyone gets divorced and everyone gets married and everybody's husband is cheating on them and all that stuff.
You make it sound like it's so much more of a soap opera than it is, because it doesn't feel soapy. You know what I mean?
No, it absolutely doesn't, because a lot of those episodes are still contained within that week, but they are big moments, right?
Yeah.
Lou's wife leaves him.
Yeah.
I don't know if you watched that episode.
I didn't watch the episode where she leaves him, but I did watch the episode where she gets remarried. It's one of the ones that totally made me cry, because it's really beautiful.
There you go. Well, the one where she leaves is also quite beautiful. Well, we get this set up in the very first episode, which I think you watched.
Yes.
Where Mary Tyler Moore, who's, longtime boyfriend who's supposed to get engaged with her, decides to keep putting it off and off and off because he's not serious about it. And she gets frustrated and moves to Minneapolis and starts a new life on her own and gets a job in this newsroom with her boss, Lou Grant, played by Tom Servo, played by Ed Asner. And quickly sort of gets hired for the job despite not fully understanding what the job is going to be, or it being clear that she has qualifications.
Well, yeah, she went in to interview for a secretarial job, which would have been far more common for women inside of 1970, which is the year that this started, right? So 1970, going in for a job, she's going in to be secretarial. It's already been filled, so he hired her for associate producer, and she's like, I don't even know what that job is.
Yeah.
So when her boss comes to her apartment later that night and is a little tipsy, not a little, she's like, oh, this is why I got the job. Oh, you thought that you had talent. You thought that people recognized your worth, but no, this is why he's here.
And this is like a big thing because like, it's weird for a TV show from 1970. It feels weird anyways, that it is depicting a predatory drunken boss like that, right? Like there's a moment where you're like, oh yeah, this is a thing that actually happens.
Yeah.
And Mary's going to have to deal with this. And then it turns out that's not what's happening at all.
No, it was really well upended because she acknowledges for the TV audience that she is expecting that this situation to become that. And so I'm immediately cued to it. And then he's like, I miss my wife. She's out of town. And you're the only other woman I know in the entire world because I just hired you on the TV station. He doesn't say that, but it's implied. Because every time Mary is not at her apartment, she is in a place that is surrounded by men and there are no other women. Her workplace is all men, at least in this episode, because the Betty White character isn't there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very much exploring what it's like to be a young single woman navigating, a male workplace environment and a dating life. She's got 2 other friends, one of whom is married, but their marriage is weird, and then he starts cheating on her.
Totally weird.
And then she has another friend who is also single and ready to mingle and is much more excited. And it's Rhoda, played by Valerie Harper. It's lots of fun. But we have this early first episode establishment that Lou really loves his wife. And so when his wife announces that she's going to be leaving him, not because he's bad to her, not because she's found someone else, not even because she doesn't love him anymore. It's just she's been so having to be a wife since they got married at 19 that she doesn't feel like she knows herself and what she's like out there on her own. And she wants to have a sense of that.
That's so interesting because the original theme song from season 1 has opening scenes of Mary Tyler Moore trying to go out on her own. And like one of the opening lines is, are you going to make it on your own?
How will you make it on your own? Yeah.
How will you make it on your own? And like, here's 4 seasons later, not a 30-year-old woman striking out on her own, but a woman who's choosing to be divorced to be out on her own. That's controversial for 1974.
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness. Divorce was not something that was super prevalent then, and certainly not for people who were, who had kids, older kids, but still kids.
So the first episode is a really great place to start if anybody hasn't watched it before. It establishes all the main characters really efficiently.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
got one of the most famous scenes, the interview scene, if you want to call it
Yes.
that, where Lou delivers the famous line, "You've got spunk. I hate spunk."
Yep. He does a lot of that, say a thing and then pull the rug out from underneath of it for Mary. Just all over the place, over and over again.
You get to meet Rhoda and Phyllis, her neighbors, each of whom would have their own shows later on.
It's true. Phyllis is wild and very strange. And I think the focus in season 1 for Phyllis is really on her parenting, because we meet her daughter Bess, and she has there's a later episode where she asks Mary to babysit Bess for a couple of days because, I don't know, she and her husband are doing something, but they're going to be around, like they're in the building. It's really weird. Anyway, she leaves like 10 parenting books with bookmarks and everything in it for phrases that Mary should use when she's talking to Bess. And like Bess comes in when Phyllis brings her in, and Phyllis is like, "No, I don't want you to mention anything about how you're going to see her. This is just what she does when she's upset. She puts on my wig and my makeup and sits sullenly." And it's like, what? What? It is so bizarre. And like 2 seconds later, the kid locks herself in the bathroom. And, Phyllis is back and is like, "She locked herself in the bathroom, didn't she?" And Mary's like, "Yes." And Phyllis goes to one of the books, goes to one of the bookmarks and is like, "Here's what you say. This is the script." So like Phyllis is parenting from a script in a book.
Yeah.
And the whole point of the episode is Mary's going to be such a good mother and Phyllis is a bad mom. And it's like, okay, let's not simplify that too much, but it is difficult when there's all this parenting advice out there to figure out what works for you. And Phyllis clearly hasn't done that yet. And it's easy to be a good mom for 2 days.
Yeah. I don't even know if the episode's point is that Phyllis is a bad mom, but she's a
No,
weird mom,
she's
and
a
she's
weird
not
mom.
a natural at it the way it feels like Mary is, although you're absolutely right. She's only given 2 days to have to deal with it.
Seriously.
And she doesn't really handle the big issue very well when the young girl wants to stay with Mary instead of going back to her mother.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she doesn't know what to do about that, and it drives her wild, and she ruins her work and everything like that.
Although she does make the point that this is something Phyllis should be doing. And I think she's right.
She is right, but also think this undercuts how good of a parent she is. Though, I mean, like, whatever. Parenting is super hard. I'm not judging.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, even babysitting for a day is hard.
No, thank you.
But it was interesting that in the very first season, there's lots of things like that where, Mary's setting up her apartment. She has a beautiful apartment. She set everything up the way she wants it. She's a really good mom. Look at her interact with this kid. She's a really good friend. Look at her build this friendship with Rhoda. And it seems like in the later seasons, they get away from Mary being a good hostess and a good mom, and they do more and more with her being a good worker and a good friend.
Yes.
And I appreciate that they move away from those, typically feminine roles, saying Mary's good at this too, and they let her actually just be good at her job.
What do you think about the rest of the main characters that we get to meet? What do you think about Murray and Ted and all of them?
They're funny and lovely, and I would hate to work with every single one of them. Ted is the newscaster, and so he has a very commanding and awesome voice. And I agree, Mike does a really good Ted Baxter.
Yeah.
It's great. Lou is like, harsh but with a heart of gold. Like he's such an odd boss. I don't think I would like him to be my boss, right? And then Murray is sarcastic and has all of these really great one-liners and is writing copy for the newsroom. I mean, I guess later on in further seasons, you can see the development of their friendship a little bit better. But would you want to work with these guys?
I mean, I can think of worse.
Okay, yeah, that's not untrue.
I mean, Lou is a very protective boss, at the very least.
That is very true. I didn't watch the episode, but apparently there's an episode where he and Mary go on a date.
I can't imagine they wouldn't have an episode where Lou and Mary try going on a date. They had 150-something episodes to make.
Why not? I mean, they put him on a date with Betty White's character after she joins their cast.
Yeah, so we get two other characters who show up later on. We get Georgette, who is Ted's girlfriend, then wife, and we get Sue Ann Nivens, the happy homemaker.
She's amazing.
Played by Betty White.
It's like a horny Martha Stewart. Betty White is amazing. She's a treasure. She does this, I am saying something light and airy, and I am very good, but also what I am saying is very pointed, and the smile on my face makes you think I'm nicer than I am. Don't mess with me. She does that so well.
It's astonishing. It is so well done. And you can see why what seemed like it was going to be a one-time appearance turned into a very regular role.
Heck yeah. I appreciate that. Sue Ann Nivens is the one who is having an affair with Phyllis's husband.
When we meet her, yes.
When we meet her in the very first episode.
We have her in, yep.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that Phyllis goes to have a conversation with her. But I think that had this episode or something like it been made now, the conversation would not have been between the wife and the mistress, but it might have actually been a conversation between the wife and the husband, who is the person who is doing something wrong. Although, like, Sue Ann knows that he's married. And even knows who he is married to. So she is not without fault in the situation, but...
No, she's certainly not.
No, but it's one of those things where it's just like, it bothers me when cheating is on a show and the cheater is not the one who is addressed with the problem. You know what I mean? And it's a typical thing that TV does because there's more dramatic tension between the wife and the mistress, perhaps. I don't know.
Sure. So there is the ongoing thing that we never get to see Lars, the husband.
True.
he's one of those absent spouses, like in a lot of sitcoms, where you can just say more and more wild things about them because you never actually have to meet them.
He's the Mrs. Columbo.
Exactly.
Except we like Mrs. Columbo.
And also, we do hear some of the ways that off-screen Phyllis is dealing with Lars, both before and after everything has unfolded.
That's true.
So he doesn't get away scot-free or doesn't face consequences. But you're right that in terms of what we're watching, absolutely, it is all about the tension between these two women.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that is unfortunate, but also very funny.
And very 1974.
Yeah. And I suppose it would not be right to talk about Mary Tyler Moore Show without talking about the other incredibly famous episode, Chuckles Bites the Dust.
Oh my gosh. It's a really funny episode.
So this is a season 6 episode.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't watched it, go treat yourself. Maybe watch a few other episodes first so that you know all the characters.
Mm-hmm.
But watch that episode. Good heavens. It is just as funny and thoughtful as I remembered it being. So in this episode, Chuckles the Clown gets a gig leading a parade for a circus that's coming to town, and he dresses up as Peter Peanut.
Yes, one of the characters he's created for his show.
As you do, but unfortunately there are some elephants nearby, and in a freak accident, the elephants get very excited about the Peanut and crush him to death.
They tried to shell him, I believe is the phrase they use. And of course, when this is delivered, Mr. Grant delivers it like deadpan. And then later on in the episode, Like, Murray can't help himself. Mr. Grant can't help himself. They are making jokes nonstop about this ridiculous and just what the heck event. And they're hilarious. They're so funny, Chris.
But it's also like this really interesting meditation, which the show does. Like they go meta. They talk about this. Like, why are we laughing so much about this terrible thing that we're so sad about? And they try to hash out, why do we laugh at terrible, terrible events? And Mary can't or isn't. Like, she's just like, what are you talking about? This is really sad. Why are you all making stupid jokes about it?
I'm the only one taking this seriously.
Yeah.
Me and Mr. Grant. And then Mr. Grant comes out of his office dying, trying not to laugh, but laughing with Murray. And then she's like, I'm the only one. I'm the only one taking this seriously. She very much sets herself up for the zing pow of the episode. Which, do we spoil that for our listeners, Chris?
I'll sound the spoiler horn.
Okay.
Skip ahead if you need to not hear. But yes, the end of the episode is the funeral. Everybody has gotten the giggles out of them, and they are all very serious as the priest begins to talk about how Chuckles the Clown brought pleasure to millions. The characters he created will be remembered by children and adults alike. Peter Peanut, Mr. Fee-Fi-Fo, Billy Banana, and my particular favorite, and Yoo-Hoo. And at this moment, finally Mary cracks.
Mm-hmm.
It's all so silly and ridiculous that she starts giggling and then tries to stifle it. She's very embarrassed. No one else is laughing. They've all gotten that out of their system.
Mm-hmm.
The preacher goes on and on and on.
And she keeps trying to suppress her laughter, and she can't. It keeps guffawing out of her, and then she tries to put on a serious face like, no, that was just me being serious.
And then the preacher says what Chuckles' motto basically was.
Oh my God, it's the best motto ever.
Had you heard the motto before? Because it's a thing that I say sometimes.
No, the only, I had never heard it before this episode, but it is how Ted Baxter at the very beginning of the episode signs off his newscast, because he says, and in the words of Chuckles the Clown, and now let me look it up, Chris, because I texted it to you.
It is a little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down your pants.
And he delivers it deadpan. Nobody laughs. And at that point in time, and then when the priest does it at the funeral, Mary just bursts out laughing. And at that point, the priest stops and says, you should laugh. He would have loved that. That's what Chuckles was all about. He was all about making people laugh. So yes, don't stifle your laughter. You should be laughing. It's what he would have wanted.
Tears were offensive to him.
Tears were offensive to him. And so what happens when Mary is finally given permission to laugh? She cries.
It's such a beautiful moment.
It really is.
Did it make you cry?
No, it made me laugh.
Oh, good. Who can tell the difference anymore?
Honestly, I can't tell the difference anymore. So, and maybe that's part of the problem or part of the solution, who can say.
Oh, it's such a wonderful...
Such a good episode.
It's such a tight episode in terms of how it's written and how it's paced. Everybody's acting is just perfect. They take this really tricky issue about the relationship between humor
Comedy.
and other big
Yeah.
emotions,
Mhm.
laughter and other big emotions, and explain that just because people are laughing doesn't mean that they're not also sad.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that they're not also outraged by things. That laughter is a way that people cope sometimes. At least some people, many people do.
And it's easier, of course, because the person who they are mourning is a clown.
Yeah.
So it does make it a little bit...
It provides a specific context for a lot of what's happening.
Yes. So, it was a really good episode. I can see why that is widely considered the best episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Well, it lives by night, but I'm getting sleepy. We have done a lot of talking, and I imagine quite a lot of it has to be edited away, but there's still got to be room to squeeze in one more final factoid. But I'm totally parched and dry. Charlotte, have you got any of that good juice?
I had one very short one that I wanted to do, especially because in episodes prior to this, you and I have talked a lot about the Native American figure Geronimo. Geronimo. And in this episode, there is a point in time where now I can't even remember what happens, but there's some jumping off of something, and
they're skiing down a thing.
They're
like
skiing
they're making
down
a
a
fun
thing.
turn.
Whatever. And in the show, one of them says Geronimo with that pronunciation, and Mike riffs Russell Means.
Yes, as if somebody else is shouting that as they make the jump.
Yes, like the first one is the husband and the second one's the wife. Anyway, Russell Means, I'm sure you know who Russell Means is, because if there was any Native American who a person in the 90s could name who was living, it was probably Russell Means. He had a very public persona that people knew because he had been in a few movies, and he was part of the American Indian movement, and he was an outspoken person within that movement, talking about some of the atrocities that were committed against Native peoples and about the breaking of treaties that the American government has done. So he's just a well-recognized name. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because whenever I think about the American Indian movement, what I think about is the occupation of Alcatraz.
Oh, yeah. Was he part of that?
He was, although there's conflicting things on the internet about it. There's one site that says he was only part of one that happened in 1964 with his father, and that he subsequently moved to another part of the country out of the San Francisco Bay Area. There's another website that attributes him to being at the 1969 occupation of Alcatraz. And mostly I just bring this up because if you're ever in the San Francisco area, like, visiting Alcatraz is an amazing thing to do as a tourist. You learn a lot. You learn a lot about America in the 20s. You learn a lot about, some very famous criminals. But now when you go, you learn a lot about the American Indian movement, and they acknowledge the occupation of Alcatraz, and they point out things that were left behind, like some spray painting on the buildings, because it has become a part of the history of Alcatraz, the island itself, but it's also a part of a movement for people's rights that we are doing a better and better job of talking about, and hopefully we are moving in a positive direction with.
I'm glad to hear that they're incorporating that. I actually, even though I've been out to San Francisco a couple of times, I've never made it out to Alcatraz. So one of these days.
I grew up in San Francisco, and I've been many times. Like, I went when I was a kid in the 80s when it was ranger-led, and what you learned when it was ranger-led very much depended on who your ranger was. So for people who visited in the 80s, they might have gotten a lot of information about the occupation of Alcatraz from the late 60s, early 70s, because it lasted a couple of years. But if you didn't get that ranger on that day, you might not have heard a thing about it. Now it's incorporated in a audio tour that everyone takes, and it walks you through the building. It has fantastic interviews and everything. And I just appreciate that they don't ignore it, and it is a part of the story that they tell.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you're going to make it after all, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our newest supporter, Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. For as little as $1 an episode, you too can be like Catherine and help us research and record this show. And you can join us in a friendly Discord and listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/152.
Well, Chris, we had a really good time talking about other things besides this movie in this episode. What are we watching next that we cannot talk about?
We are going to be whipping back to the KTMA era and looking at KTMA episode 12, Mighty Jack.
Oh, Chris, why are you so mean to me?
It's Mighty Jack. You've seen Mighty Jack because they did it again in season 3.
Have I? Is that a movie about a really large gorilla who is not
No.
King Kong? No, that's Mighty Joe. This is his brother Jack.
This is another Japanese TV series that they kind of turned into kind of a movie that they did in the KTMA era and then redid in season 3. I'm pretty sure you've seen the season 3 episode, but let's see how you get along with the KTMA episode. And, listeners, you know how this works. We're going to do the season 3 episode immediately afterwards. So surprise, surprise.
Complies.
But until then...
If I'm ever asked to do a love scene with someone turning into a bat, I'll do it, but only if it's tastefully done.
Just remember, the first 30 years are the hardest. Take it away, Theme Squad. Wobble, wobble, wobble.